I didn't say a word when the HOA president slammed a citation packet on our porch table and told my dad he had no legal standing to challenge them. My dad just smiled, slid one folded page across the table, and waited. It was the county ordinance. They were quoting one he had written himself 23 years earlier. Watching their lawyer's face change color was the quietest kind of justice I've ever seen. Back when we moved in, there was even an HOA, just a sleepy cul-de-sac lined with oaks and the sound of sprinklers at dusk. My dad bought the house after retiring from the county's Department of Planning and Zoning. He'd spent decades drafting and enforcing the very rules that shaped neighborhoods like ours. To him, this place was supposed to be his peace somewhere to tend his garden, fix old fences, and watch his grandkids ride their bikes down a safe street. For years, life was easy. Then a new developer finished the last vacant lot and filed for a homeowners association. Within months, the same friendly neighbors started referring to compliance committees and architectural standards. They installed a gate, mailed rule books, and started measuring people's lawns like they were running a military base. At first, we laughed. But then the letters started coming. They said my dad's native shrubs along the easement blocked visibility. They cited zoning section 14 to 112. My dad read it, chuckled, and said, "They've got the wrong code and the wrong guy." He wrote back politely, attaching the exact ordinance, complete with his initials from when he de-drafted it back in 1998. He explained the exception for native plants under 30 inches. You'd think that would have ended it. Instead, they doubled down. The HOA president clipboard and hand showed up in person to announce a $250 fine. Dad didn't argue. He just nodded, went inside, and pulled out a gray binder I'd seen all my life labeled municipal zoning. 1998 revision. He flipped to section 14 to 112B, and there, in faded ink, was his own signature. "Looks like I'm arguing with myself," he said quietly. He tried being civil again, sent a full packet to the HOA, with the ordinance history and county approval letter. A week later, they taped a bright orange non-compliance notice on our mailbox, threatening a lien. That was the moment I saw the change in him, the one where he stops being polite and starts playing chess. He spent nights in his study again, surrounded by maps, memos, and old blueprints. He pulled the original developer filings, traced every clause of the HOA SBI, and found what he was looking for. Their covenants were filed under a master plan that explicitly deferred enforcement to county zoning, which meant the HOA had zero authority to override the very ordinances he wrote. When he was ready, he filed a request for administrative clarification with the county zoning board. Not a lawsuit, just a question. Could private covenants contradict public code? 2 weeks later, the HOA called an emergency meeting, claiming a resident had lodged a nuisance complaint. My dad and I went together, folding chairs, cheap coffee, and tension thick enough to choke on. The president started the meeting like she was hosting a courtroom, drum accusing him of defiance and noncompliance. My dad let her finish, then calmly said, "Before we continue, could I have this read into the minutes?" He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin binder. "This," he said, "is section 14 to 112B. Visibility exceptions for native plantings, drafted, revised, and ratified under my supervision in 1998. You're citing my ordinance incorrectly." The HOA's lawyer, a young guy clearly out of his depth, tried to argue that HOA bylaws were private contracts. My dad turned another page, except that your own covenant Article 3, Section 2 states, compliance with county zoning as a prerequisite for enforcement. I wrote that language too, as county liaison for this subdivision's approval. Silence. The lawyer blinked. The president's jaw tightened. Then my dad handed them a stamped letter from the county zoning director, confirming his interpretation is correct and reminding the HOA they had no jurisdiction to override public code. We walked out without saying another word. 3 days later, the fines vanished. The orange notices disappeared. The HOA issued a formal apology, blaming administrative miscommunication. But my dad's clarification request had already kicked off a county audit. It turned out the HOA had been enforcing several illegal restrictions on fences, sheds, parking, even paint colors that contradicted zoning ordinances. The county ordered them to suspend enforcement until they corrected their covenants. 2 board members quit. The president stepped down before the next election, and just like that, the loudest voices in the neighborhood went quiet. My dad didn't celebrate. He just went back to trimming his shrubs and fixing the porch rail. I asked if he felt vindicated. He smiled. No. Just reminded them to read the rules before they swing them. Now, the street feels like it used 2 kids on bikes. Neighbors chatting, no warning, letters taped to doors. Sometimes the former president walks her dog past her house. She never looks up. My dad always waves anyway. He never yelled, never threatened, never broke a law. He just let his own work defend him. The HOA tried to find my dad, but he wrote the zoning laws they cited, and in the end, the only thing they really learned was who had written the book they'd been trying to throw at him.